people of the internet, my name is Omesh, and today we'll be having quite a fun topic, won't we? Part 3, Yugoslavia, its life. Now, personally, as you see, I'm not quite as hyped up or as emotional as I used to be on the other parts. It's mostly because I know what's gonna be coming after this one. Anyways, foreshadowing aside, let's talk about what Yugoslavia did, what made it so special, and why there's a new word in the English dictionary called Yugo-nostalgia. What is Yugo-nostalgia? I'll be answering all of that today. Come, join me in my quest to ravel the biggest mystery in the Balkans, and that is Yugoslavia's life, politics, and its sad and tragic ending. After World War II, Yugoslavia was left in ruins, bombarded, to some degree even genocided. 2 million people lost their lives, either fighting or being victims of Nazism. But that didn't stop us. We had a quite interesting economy, being somewhat socialistic and capitalistic at the same time. We had a workers managing economy. We allowed the ownership of some private properties, but those properties are all owned by individual workers. Like every single person that's part of a firm or a company and all the such, they're technically the shareholder of the company. With those bases and also a lot of government fundings, you had one of the most progressive states in the East. One of the most progressives. Personally, I view the Soviet Union as being more progressive than Yugoslavia, but nevertheless, that's a topic for another day. What Yugoslavia did in the first 10 to 20 years of its existence was no short of a miracle. It went from having a literacy rate from about 10%, and in some regions like close to 3%, to almost eliminating illiteracy. 80% of the population started learning how to read and write, and that is the glorious power of allowing everybody to go to school regardless of their gender or race, and also for free. Other than that, we had pretty high level universities. We had universities in Belgrade, Zagreb, Sarajevo, Ljubljana, Titograd, or Podgorica as it's known today, and Skopje. We all had quite progressive and quite great universities all together, and we not only were academically very successful in our own nation, we were producing a lot of things homemade and created by Yugoslavia. Hell, one of the most famous things that Yugoslavia created during this time is the Yugo. That thing slaps. That car, Yugo, would still run till this day. But other than the Yugo, what else did Yugoslavia did during these periods of times? Well, quite a lot. It was the middle child between the East and the West. The Soviets wanted, well, together, so the Soviets, the British, the Americans, and the French wanted Yugoslavia to be divided in two. Serbia, Montenegro, Macedonia to be on the eastern side, communist sphere and all the such, while Bosnia, Croatia, and Slovenia to be on the western side. Why? They had their own reasons. But we held together, we held strong, and we were independent on both of them. In fact, we were so great at being ourselves that we formed a movement called the Independent Movement, a non-aligned movement. And we were so successful at that we even brought in India, Egypt, South Africa, and many other nations which were just fed up with constant wars and terrorism that was caused by imperialists come from the West and also the Soviets from the East. And us, as the Yugoslavs, we were ahead of that movement. We were known as the leaders of it. Another thing that Yugoslavia also pioneered is its relationships with most nations. At one period of time, the Yugoslav passport was known as the best passport to have. You could travel to basically anywhere on the planet and you would have a visa for it. No need to go to embassies, no need for anything. Your passport is the only thing necessary to enter that nation for at least a minimum of 30 days. Given that, it's good relationships with basically everybody, and you have a giga chat of a leader, which is Tito. He smoked in the White House with a cigar, and people told him, no, you don't need to smoke in this White House, and he still smoked. He was a badass. But other than what Tito did and in the White House, he also aided Yugoslavia into growing into an economic powerhouse in the region. But at the same time putting Yugoslavia in massive levels of debt. In fact, the debt management in Yugoslavia was so horrific, the bureaucracy in Yugoslavia was heavily increased, like extremely. It was fulfilled with either incompetency, it was filled with people which entered by corrupt manners, it was something which shouldn't have happened. And if they probably would have sticked into Marxism-Leninism, by that I mean shot people in the back of the head, they probably would have still managed to this day and would have had a proletariat state. Now it would be sanctioned, it would probably be threatened by war and all the such if the Eastern Bloc did collapse. But if it hadn't, it would still have existed to this day. But we're not talking about the alternative, we're talking about the current state of affairs. Now, how was Yugoslavia's reaction towards some other wars? Well, to Korea, Vietnam, to Laos and Cambodia, to Afghanistan and Iraq, and many other places, Yugoslavia was trying to be neutral. It didn't try to intervene, it didn't try to propose some sort of power. What it mostly did was either try to help young, impressionate teenagers and students to also show up in Yugoslavia. In fact, one of these young, impressionate teenagers was Muammar Gaddafi, and he also ended in a quite particular manner. Rest in peace. You also had a lot of other places which were fanatically very against the West, but they absolutely adored Yugoslavia. For example, North Korea, every single year, both Tito and Kim Il-sung, they've sent personal letters of friendship to one another. They've also had states visits and all the such. With Vietnam, it was also quite a great relationship. With Cuba as well, they had a great relationship. And if I'm not mistaken, the first ever Cuban embassy was opened in Yugoslavia, but that might be just like a weird fact nomer that nobody probably tried to confirm. Now, enough about the other fun facts, let's talk about Yugoslavia's external affairs, the countries which border Yugoslavia. Albania and Yugoslavia's relationships was actually quite good. Enver Hoxha together with Tito went hand in hand, they quite enjoyed each other, and in fact Tito helped Albania to remove itself from the Soviet Union and also remove itself from China, and helped it when it was by itself, and then Albania removed itself from Yugoslavia's sphere of influence, and it was complicated to say the least. But nonetheless, it had a really weird relationships due to the fact that there was more ethnic Albanians living in Yugoslavia at this period of time than in Albania. And in fact, till this day, there are more Albanians living outside of Albania and in the former Yugoslav republics today. Nonetheless, let's continue. Greece. How did Greece view Yugoslavia? Yugoslavia was a communistic state, a proletariat, pro-worker state. How would Greece, which had a monarchy, a fascist dictatorship, then later on a democracy, as we call it, fare? Actually, they went hand in hand. Greece always had good relations with Yugoslavia, but also their leaders, with politicians, with foreign affairs, and all the such. Bulgaria, they calmed themselves down. In fact, they also even had a proposed plan of making a greater Yugoslavia together with Albania in 1946, but everything crumbled down. That is a story for another video. Romania's relationship with Yugoslavia now got a little bit more complicated due to the fact that Yugoslavia was invaded by Romania in World War II. The sourness didn't turn into flat-out hatred, and the Romanian people still did enjoy visiting and talking about Yugoslavia. Hungary and Yugoslavia's relationship has been much more normalized, and to some degree they've been in the right track. Austria has tried to go towards the Switzerland route and has tried to be neutral. So their relationship with Yugoslavia was cheap labor? Nevertheless. Yugoslavia's international affairs, on the other hand, was quite weird because the major powers of the planet, like you have China, the Soviet Union, Britain, France, and America, viewed Yugoslavia in a quite weird predicament because it wasn't part of the PRC and the Soviet bloc. It wasn't part of the French, British, and American part. It wasn't fully capitalistic, it wasn't fully socialist. The socialists called them capitalists, the capitalists called them socialists, and they were trying to propose them to being the next member of the permanent heads of the UN, but no, that just didn't go anywhere. But other than that, their leaders quite did respect each other. And then, after all of these things that I've explained to you, of everything that we have accomplished, from eliminating illiteracy, from to some degree almost eliminating poverty, to helping everything with our nation to thrive and prosper and become so well known, our economy started to plummet. And as this time was approaching, Tito himself passed away. And after his death comes also the death of Yugoslavia. And no, I don't mean that because of his death Yugoslavia wasn't able to be held together. I don't believe in the strong man theory. I believe in a man, rather than to go with a proper, more democratic nation, with more ownership towards the workers, with more peace coordination, with more plans, and even more emphasis on integrating the economy in a much better way, it could have been avoided. But his death came together with the economic death. And by that, I conclude part 3 of Yugoslavia. Join me later on part 4, the death and the war of Yugoslavia. Ciao.